So what does that actually look like? Like if we're looking at like tactically speaking, not just theory, how can we let our partners maybe like what does that look like? Like the phases, right? The day, like the sun comes, it goes. What does that look like literally speaking?
I think literally speaking, it's cultivate seeing who they are, not who you see they could be.
All right, Mr. Erick Godsey, how we doing, my brother?
Good, man. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for making time for me because it is a Saturday. You've been working, so I sincerely appreciate you. And so this is a new podcast, and you definitely came to mind when I was thinking of like what are my dream guests. Like you're on the list, just so you know.
Dope.
And the reason why is because you embody what I think it is to be a sentimental man. So how would you describe a sentimental man, like to you? What does that mean?
I would say a sentimental man is a man who lives with an open heart and is willing to share what happens when the meat suit stumbles from trying to cope with everything that comes up from having your heart open to life.
Ooh, dude, I might just use that for like the intro.
It's yours, yeah.
So what are some of the most memorable moments? Actually, we'll ask this first. We'll just flow. What are some memorable moments of you stumbling in your meat suit, your body, your flesh?
Yeah, man. The first one that comes up was, so I did Wachuma for the first time 2 years ago, and that's a plant medicine that's a derivative of San Pedro that is called heart opening. And I did it in Peru under the guidance of the late Don Howard. And I remember this very visceral moment on the second day that we drank. He does this thing where he looks at you before he pours the cup, and it looks like God itself is looking at you. And he looked at me in front of about 25 other people, and he slowly brought his finger to his head, and he shook his head no. And then he slowly pointed his finger to his heart, and he shook his head yes. And I never felt so seen by a man in my life, and I knew what he was saying was true, and it was to get out of my head and to take it into my heart. When I came back from that experience, my heart was open enough to really dive into a relationship. And I eventually got into a relationship where for the first time in my life, I felt, oh, this might be the woman that I'm going to have children with. And the stumbling was how I began to act once I started telling myself the story that she might be my one. And we kind of talked about this at lunch the other day, but my story for the last couple of years has always been oriented towards becoming the man that I know that is my potential to be. And then everything kind of organizes itself around that guiding star. And that's how I was in this relationship for the first couple of months when she was deeply attracted to me. And then once I had that moment of like, oh my God, what if this is the one? It completely changed my story unconsciously. And my story became, be the type of man that you think she would be the most attracted to. And it fucked everything up. And it led to the relationship ending in probably the most painful way that I could ever fear a relationship ending, which is she cheated. But I played my part that led to that by changing my story from trying to be the man that I knew I'm meant to be to trying to be the man that I projected thinking she wanted. And that's probably the most visceral stumbling that's happened along the way recently.
Dude, thanks for sharing that. Like I think I mentioned this at lunch that I went through almost the exact same thing of changing my story of initially what she was attracted to because I said the same thing of, this is the person I could spend the rest of my life with. And then for me, it was out of a place of fear,
Yep.
of not wanting to lose that.
Same.
And I acted differently.
Same.
However, now we know how would we, I don't want to say hold, how would we describe that? To know we're better informed, practiced to embrace that type of relationship later? How would we describe that?
Yeah, for me, it's recognizing the parts inside of me that led me to act in that new story. And so the way that I conceptualize it is, I have an inner boy. I call him Soul, S-O-L. I can see what he looks like. I know how he moves. I know how he talks. And he will tell the story if I'm not properly being his father, that the woman has to be our mommy. And when he starts to tell that story, he activates this guard that I call Samson, which is the part of me that is always worried that the woman will betray us. And I have particular experiences in my early life where the pattern that I learned is that women will betray you. And it's becoming aware of when Soul acts up because he triggers Samson, and then being aware of when Samson is the one telling the stories that I'm telling myself about the relationship that I'm in. And it's just being aware and knowing that it's not the truth.
That's cool, dude. So for people who have never been introduced to this world, say this is the first podcast they've ever listened to with me or you, or maybe ever. How would you introduce the benefit and maybe the not so benefit of telling yourself a story?
Yeah, so I think the place to start is to recognize, and there's a bunch of quotes from a lot of smart people that basically say the same thing, but if you think you're one thing, you're asleep. There's a quote by Gurdjieff that I really love, and it's that man is not singular, man is legion. And then there's a bunch of quotes by Jung which say the same thing, and it's that there's a bunch of different characters inside of you. And they all have their own story. They all have their own goals. And a part of becoming what Jung would call an individualized person is to become aware of these different parts and to integrate them. And there's a psychological system that's called internal family systems, which is essentially this idea of recognizing that there are parts of you which you could think of as characters that you've exiled. And Soul, my inner boy, you could say is one of those characters. And because they're exiled, they're in the shadow. You can't see them. But they've created guards. And the guards are your patterns, your avoidant patterns that you use so you don't feel the emotion that the exile represents. So like the exile would represent betrayal. And then one of my guards is just don't trust women. And if you want to continue to live the life that you have now, don't look at these parts because that's how you got here. There's a quote by Jung, and it's, until the unconscious is made conscious, it will control your life and you will call it fate. It doesn't have to be so. You can change the story that you're living, but a part of changing the story is to recognize the story that brought you here. And the story that brought you here is largely informed by the parts that you've exiled, that are in the shadow, and then the guards that you've created so you can keep those parts in the shadow. Like, if you're a binge drinker, that's one of your guards. If you're a chronic womanizer, that's one of your guards. If you're a workaholic, that's one of your guards.
So that would be because that is guarding the genesis of that.
It's a behavior that you lean on so you don't have to feel the emotion that you find condemnable or bad.
Okay. That makes sense. And, we hear about the negative stories, right, that you tell yourself. Do you view stories as good or bad? How do you view the stories?
Stories are like money. They're like power. They're like water. They are a fact of your existence, and they're tools. And you cannot operate in the world if you do not have a story. Everyone listening has a collection of stories of who they think they are now. And you can see those stories in how you describe who you are to other people. You can see those stories in how you allow people to treat you. We also all have stories about where we're trying to be. We all have stories about what our ideal future is, and they inform the choices that we make every day. Stories, and we said this at lunch and it was organic, but now I'm going to repeat it so it doesn't feel quite as organic, but it's the truth, is that stories are the hands of the psyche. It's your stories that allow you to engage with the world. We all have stories, but most of our stories are unconscious to us, and most of our stories conflict with each other. Like, for example, we might all have the story that we want to be a highly productive CEO, but then we have the story we want to be the friend, or we want to be the fun guy. And so when we're in a situation where it's Friday night and we have both of those stories going on, and someone invites you to go to a party that you know will lead you to doing cocaine and drinking a bunch, and then you're going to be shit for the next 4 days, you have two conflicting stories, you know? And until you become really clear on what stories are your true soul calling and what stories are those guards, you know, you can be in the same cycle for 4 years where you're like, I still have the job that I know I don't like. I still smash my consciousness every weekend because I don't like my job. I'm upset with the fact that I smash my consciousness with alcohol and cocaine every weekend. I know I'm not doing the thing that I want to do, and I'm fucking angry and depressed, and I'm hiding it, and, you know.
So how do you view, I'm just curious, like substances, right? Is it, whether it's alcohol, cocaine, plant medicine, whatever it is, right? I just want to hear, because you have experiences like conscious, intentional, whatever it may be. For people who've never experienced that, I think it would be cool to hear. Do you view it the same way, like money or like stories?
I do.
That
Right.
it's a tool, and it could be. Yeah, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
So one way that I think about it is your conscious, or your experience of life is a simulation generated by your nervous system. And all of these quote unquote drugs are chemicals that you can take that alter the way your nervous system simulates reality. And so it comes down to intention. Why are you using this substance? Are you being an explorer? You know, like, because I think with the explorer attitude, every substance is okay to dance with. But then also recognize, and this can be done with plant medicines just as viscerally as it can be done with alcohol. Are you choosing this thing to avoid? Are you choosing this thing to run away from? Are you choosing this thing out of fear or out of guilt or out of shame or out of obligation? And if you're choosing it from that intention, you're not free. And then I think it automatically makes it what most people connote as a drug. Whereas if you choose it with intention of, I'm doing this to be brave, I'm doing this to see more clearly, I'm doing this to open myself up to changing my stories to be more in alignment with what my soul's asking me to be, then it's medicine.
I like that, dude. And then with your inner child, you name soul. Is that, I'm curious, I have a guess, but where did the name soul come from?
Spanish for sun.
Okay, I was right.
And but I also like the wink that, you know, like he's a part of my soul when he's healthy and taken care of.
I like that a lot. What, I loved, you know, you said a lot of great things I loved at lunch, and then soul, sun. I think before we kind of just move on with this whole female relationship thing, like I used to think I had it all figured out. I thought nothing could affect me. I thought I was just Mr. Even Keeled until that girl came along, and it totally shook me. And yeah, because I really did, I committed 100%, like in my head, and I told myself that she's the one, so here we go. I'm going all in. And you described the masculine energy as the sun, which it is known like that energy, right? Like is the sun. And so will you go into how masculine energy is the sun, but how you took that too far?
Yeah, so the archetypical expression of the divine masculine, you could say on one level, is how the sun is. And it's that the sun is always giving light. It doesn't care where it falls. It doesn't care how the thing that receives the light responds. Its sole focus is to give light, and it will do it until the day it dies. Where I bastardize the divine masculine and tell myself it's the story of the divine masculine is that when I find someone that I love, that I want to be in a deep relationship with, it's like I hijack the sun from its spot and I take it out of its natural cycle of descending below the curve of the earth where it provides darkness. And I just bring the sun right up to this beautiful plant. And I'm like, hey, I'm the sun. Look, I'm the sun. And if you do that, you will destroy the plant. And I think that it's a part of my own bullshit that we can get into if you want to.
Let's freaking do it, dude.
But that a part of my story about what it means to love somebody is to cultivate their higher self. And on one level, I think that that is a part of love, but it's a part of love. But it's the part of love that I'm most comfortable being in. And then I overdo it in relationships where I only want to interact with their highest self. I only unconsciously reward them for acting in their higher self. And you know, if a plant has been starved of sunlight, that's a beautiful thing at the beginning. But
they love it. They want all the vitamin D they can get.
Right. And there's puns there too.
Yeah.
But plants need cycles. And if you're constantly just being that thing, it will wither the soul of the other person up. And then they will default.
I love this so much.
They will default into their guard patterns. And they will fucking run away. And the reason my last relationship ended so painfully was because I wouldn't let her retreat. I kept bringing the sun to her over and over until the point where she had to
she was trying to shut the blinds, but you're like, nope.
Right. So, and like,
here's the sun.
That's actually not loving. We talked about it, but it's like a personal trainer who's not confident in their ability to help people heal through the body. What do they do when they work someone out for the first time? They destroy them. And there's a part of me not being secure in my masculinity where I feel like I have to just constantly bring that. And it's from my insecurity. It's not truly being the divine masculine.
And I think it's just not you. I mean, it's definitely me. And that definitely comes from, I think, a lot of men, whether it's like whether it's you want to fix something, or even for us who I would deem as both woke, in air quotes, individuals, adventurers, soul searchers, truth seekers, whatever. And I'm similar as you. I think that's why I relate so much to this, is because I do want this person to live their highest self. So what does that actually look like? Like if we're looking at, like, tactically speaking, not just theory, how can we let our partners maybe, like, what does that look like? Like the phases, right? The day, like the sun comes, it goes. What does that look like, literally speaking?
I think literally speaking, it's cultivate seeing who they are, not who you see they could be, and then loving who they are. And that recognizing that you cannot make someone transform ever, period. And that the most effective way to help someone step into their true calling is to love them as they are to the point where they feel safe. And then they will do it on their own. And then the thing to recognize is know what your boundaries are, know what it is that you want. And if you loving them as they are leads to them consistently transgressing your boundaries, you end the relationship. Or you at least end the relationship in a romantic way, or in the romantic sense. And so a part of it is, like, I create Evernote documents for people that I start dating, and like I'll keep track of like
I love it, dude.
like when their birthdays are, what gifts they love, what things really light them up. But I'll also pay attention. Like I'll also write down the behaviors of who they are now, so I can see very clearly. Like there's a quote by Emerson that I love, and it's that what you do speaks so loudly, I cannot hear what you say.
Mm-hmm.
And just keep an inventory of the set of behaviors that they are now, and love them. But also, I haven't done this yet, but I should, and I will when I get into my next deep relationship, but articulate my boundaries, you know? And when they transgress your boundaries, speak to them in truth, communicate, and be willing to do the dance, you know, because a part of your boundaries aren't always right. And I think that there's a deeper lesson that we fall in love with people who we are ready to be taught by. And that if you let yourself love them, you'll probably renegotiate a little bit of your boundaries, but don't break them. Or only you can intuitively know what boundaries are ready to be molded. And so it's seeing who they are, knowing the list of action patterns of the behaviors that represent who they are now. Know what your boundaries are, and when they get crossed, communicate, and then feel when, like, I'm in a dance with someone now that because I'm articulating my boundaries and I'm paying attention to who they are now, it very likely will not stay a romantic relationship. And that it's also a function of faith, that if you're in your truth and you move towards the you that you can feel you're called to be, that the right person will find their way into your life, and you don't have to force any relationship to stay in something that's not truth.
What is your experience with what do you know your Enneagram types?
I did it a couple of years ago, and I would venture to say that I'm different now, but I think I had 3 that were the same score. I think it was like a 1, 4, and a 5, or a 1 and a 3 and a 4.
Okay. So I asked that just because of the next question of what are some things you've tried to force? Because is that something, I think that's part of the masculine energy, like doing
100%.
action, trying to make something happen. So what other instances, because I know we can all relate, of trying to force something instead of just, dude, it is hard to surrender, bro. Because it feels like, because we're told to take action, and if you're not taking action, you're weak, basically.
Yeah. So the thing that I offer there is the action that I take that is deeply masculine, or at least just deeply divine, I think, is I am going to share my truth. Like if you're in a relationship with me, you're going to get my truth. And that's the action that I will take. But I surrender to what the outcome is from me speaking my truth.
I like this. So surrendering the outcomes.
Right. Like so many people waste so much energy trying to figure out what to say so they can get the outcome they want. And I just don't do that.
I forgot about this. That's true.
I just give that up. And it's a quasi dogmatic belief that if I speak what feels like my truth in the moment to the best of my ability, whatever happens is the best possible thing that can happen. And so the surrendering is what happens as a result of me being honest, you know? Do you implement this same mindset at work? So the truth is no. The truth is that the way that I see it at work is, if you imagine that your truth speaking is an instrument in a symphony, when it comes to my personal life, I am the main instrument, and so I don't have to. I frankly don't care about how the other instruments respond. I'm the center instrument. I'm going to speak my truth, and those that resonate will find their place in the symphony. At work, I'm not the center instrument. And so it's about feeling the tune of what's happening there. Never to lie outright, but to know when to play certain notes. You know, because if my highest goal is that the symphony works, I have to have the emotional intelligence to feel the right timing, you know? And so I will never outright lie
I love
at
that.
work, but I have to feel the song, you know, because it's not just about me. It's about the health of the entire orchestra.
I love that, dude. And you mentioned earlier that you were the like unofficial psychologist for the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what have you learned from, because, you know, you have a really cool story about, you know, working at Chipotle, you know, and like, and you were, you know, you were coaching people individually, and then you tried to get a job on it. You didn't get it. Eventually you got it. What have you learned bringing, I mean, you're perfect for this, you know, this organization, like your mindset, it's so perfect. But what have you learned to like bringing your mindset to an office setting? What has it taught you?
Ooh, a lot. But I think that the core thing is that I recognize that I'm very emotionally tuned to other people's emotions. And I think there's actually really interesting research on if you have an emotionally volatile parent, you're more likely to have high empathy / intuition, because a part of you protecting yourself as a child was to be able to feel the emotional state of that parent. And
Oh, wait. So if we have a highly volatile, emotional volatile parent, research shows that we're more empathetic because we've got to be ready to protect and get ready if they're going to get
right,
explode or whatever.
we have to be able to intuit their emotion without them speaking.
Roger that.
And so I had an emotionally volatile mother, and it was never violence, but it was always like she had chronic deep depression episodes. And as the oldest boy, quote unquote, I felt responsible as a child to like, I found that, ooh, if I said the right thing or if I do the right thing,
Yeah.
mom's a little bit happier. And so as a child, I very quickly learned to be able to feel her emotional states. So when I'm at work, I can feel the team's emotional states. And the thing that I've learned probably most viscerally is I just have to ask them to go on a walk. We'll go on a walk around on it. And I simply have to listen and then hear what authentically comes up inside of me and then just offer it. And that's it.
That's it. What's one thing that you think is a misconception about emotions? Being emotional, being sentimental, open. What's one of the misconceptions that you see reoccur?
So the first two things that come up are kind of the exaggerated sides of both poles. And one pole is that all emotions are weakness, and then the other pole is all emotions are true and valid. And I think that both of those are misconceptions. I think emotions are essentially messengers from your psyche to your ego that are trying to get you to behave in a way that's more adaptive. And I think the quote is by Rumi, and it's a poem that I don't know off the top of my head, but I cited enough where I should probably memorize it. But
Yeah.
it's about let the visitor in and invite them to sit down and have tea and just listen to them. And all of your emotions are like visitors who are coming to your home, and they might come in and they're beautiful and they just want to sit down and talk and you love having them. And some of them will come through and they will tear up the fucking house. But your job each time is to sit in that chair, make the tea, and when they're ready to sit down, they'll sit down and they'll talk to you. And it's about the way that I see it. It's almost like how a mythical king would deal with like an angry person from the kingdom coming with like a transgression. The function of the king is to find the way to honor the transgression in a way that's for the best for the entire kingdom. So like if you have an angry farmer who feels like the smith is not honoring the cattle, you know, he might say like, I want you to throw the smith in jail. It's like, no, that's not the proper way to respond to what this is. But maybe what it can be is you bring the smith out too, and then you have them talk out a resolution. And so, for example, like, if you haven't been enforcing your boundaries in a relationship for 2 months, eventually your inner warrior is going to be like, you should fucking cheat, or you should do something mean to them, or you should destroy them or whatever. No. But you can hear that emotion. You can let it bring you the message it's meant to bring you, and then you can act in a way that's in accordance, that's the best for the entire organism, which might be like, write down exactly the 3 behaviors that have most hurt you in the last couple of months. Be willing to have a conversation with them that these are the things that I'm feeling when you do this, and here are my requests that I would like from you if you would like to try to find a way for us to continue to dance together. You know, and so emotions are messengers. It doesn't mean that they're infallible, but they are for sure useful. And your responsibility is to hear them and then to find the most adaptive way to honor them.
I love that, dude. And have you had experience, like, I mean, I assume you have because you're human, but shutting off emotions, like someone's coming in trying to have tea with you and you lock the door?
For sure. So in the most recent relationship that I've been dancing with the last couple of weeks, it's oscillated between like deep attraction, and then I'll hear Samson, you know, and Samson will start to tell the story of like, she's going to hurt you. You should just remove yourself. And like, what that would look like is, don't text back. Don't reach out.
With this ex-lover?
No, with this current.
Oh, current.
That
okay.
could become a deeper relationship, but we're in this weird dance. And then it's about becoming aware, like, oh, that's Samson. He's strategizing that we should withhold love. And the answer is just no. Like, I'll hear what you have to say. I can feel that you're afraid. But we're going to choose to live with the chest open right now. And so that means, like, we are going to text her back when it's on our time. You know, like, we're not going to ignore it, but I'm also not going to stop talking to the person in front of me to respond to this text, you know? And I think that that's a practical, recent example of, like, there's a part of us that's always trying to get us to shut our heart because it's afraid.
Dude, constantly. So, you know, without giving too much out, when you were, you know, tempted to close your heart, how did you open it? Like, what did you do? Was it just like the text back? Was it just like figuratively opening your heart, just like in your mind?
Yeah.
What did that look like when you opened your heart?
Yeah. At the point that I'm at right now, I don't have to do anything other than to remember. So I just have to bring awareness back to it. And so, like, really, it's as simple as I can feel that I haven't been as connected to her as I have been for the last couple of weeks. And she texts me, and I can feel the part that I would call Samson is like, we're not going to respond to that because it wasn't as deep as we wanted. Like
a text wasn't as deep?
Right.
Interesting.
And so, like, I'll go through my work day, and then I'll go work out. And then working out is really a great way for me to, like, reconnect to this part of me that is powerful and calm and knowing. And then after I work out, like, I'll send her a song that, like, we have this thing where we send each other songs that we like. I'll send a song that I love, and that's it. But it's
no words, just a song.
Right. Like, because the text before didn't really, like, it didn't carry the conversation forward.
Okay.
You know, and so the Samson part would be like, I'm just going to stop, you know, but, like, I know for me that that's me being small, and that's me withholding love, you know, because I genuinely heard this song that made me think of her. So I'm going to share it, you know, and
I like that.
It can be that simple.
What if someone who isn't at the point you're at, right, just a simple awareness shift? You've done a lot of work. What if someone is at the very beginning of they're married or whatever it is, and they're scared shitless of just being vulnerable, like showing, like, hey, I'm afraid. Hey, I lost my job, or whatever it may be, whatever we're afraid of, what's one small thing that we can do just to start to activate the opening of the heart?
Yeah. It's being honest and open with yourself. And for me, that's journaling. And so if you're in a situation where what you're feeling is too strong to share with somebody, at least be honest with yourself. And so like what that looks like is I will open up a Word document in Evernote, or I'll write with a piece of paper and I'll just write down like, I just got fired and I'm afraid to tell anyone in my life. And then I'll just start writing. I'll set a timer for 20 minutes. I don't think, I don't edit. I just start writing about like whatever is on my heart about that idea, and just cultivating the primary relationship, which is the one with myself. Like, can I be honest with the fact that I'm terrified and that I'm scared and that I'm angry and that I feel shame? And like, because what a lot of people who are spiritual, quote unquote, is they won't even be honest with themselves that these are feelings that they're feeling, because it's positive vibes only. And like, that's denial. That's
like
spiritual bypassing. Like, you are in a body, you have an ego, you're going to feel all of the emotions that come with being a person and being in a body and having an ego. And a part of the spiritual path is admitting it, allowing it, recognizing that it's a part of being a person, you know? And so for people just starting, it's about, can you be honest with yourself? And I find that journaling is the most effective way to start that dance.
Dude, I love that. And even how you said, because I feel like some of us, well, I don't know where to start, or I don't know how to journal or how to write. You literally just said, you said, I'm afraid of, because I just lost my job. Like, literally whatever you're thinking, just start that process.
Yeah. And the book that I would recommend for people who think that I don't know how to journal, I don't know where to start, is called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And the core idea is every day, first thing in the morning, you just write whatever is on your mind. You don't ever reread it. You don't show it to anybody else. You don't edit anything. And you just write for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. What most people do when they journal, if they're being honest with themselves or if they're aware enough, is that they're anticipating it being reread by either them or someone else.
Yep,
and so they think that it has to be wise, it has to be smart, it has to be insightful. No. It can literally be, I don't know what to say. I'm afraid right now. I don't know if I'm doing this right. Am I even doing this right? Like, I have to get cat food. I don't feel good in my body. I feel like I haven't. And then you just fucking go. And the key is you don't even reread it. You just write. And that the only thing is just fucking be honest. And like, that really, I feel like, was the beginning of my quote unquote spiritual dance. Is I religiously wrote for like 45 minutes, and I don't recommend that to everybody. But every morning for, I think, like 2 or 3 months. And it completely changed my life, man. Like,
how did it change your life?
I was able to be honest with myself. Like, I was able to start admitting to myself, like, if you aren't at a point where you can be radically honest with someone in your life and you don't know how to do it with yourself, you're going through life never having an authentic conversation. And if you're waiting for someone to show up in your life that you can have it with, you're going to be waiting. But you can start today with yourself through journaling and just knowing that, like, I know that no matter what is happening in my life, I have a place that I can go to have an authentic conversation, and it's with myself, and it's through journaling.
Dude, that's powerful. What's one thing, you know, if you're willing to go here, whether it's currently, in the past, what's something that you've had shame over that you've healed? Or maybe you haven't healed.
Yeah. No, I have healed it because I can share it. Because whenever this shame thing would come up, I would always think of this thing first, and then I wouldn't say it. So I'm not circumcised. And when I was 11, I saw a female comedian on a stand-up comedy make a joke that all the good men are either gay or uncircumcised. And as an 11-year-old, I just downloaded shame.
Isn't that interesting?
Shame. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was, I think, maybe 21 when I started to recognize, like, oh, I feel shame about not having genital mutilation done to me because my culture has told itself that it's the right thing to do. And I've never actually had an experience with a woman where she
Said
cared,
anything or
right, ever. And as I've had more relationships with women and I've been more honest with the fact that I had shame about this, like, it's gone, you know, and it's gone through being vulnerable and sharing it, you know. And what's interesting is that I've healed it enough where I can talk about it, but I still feel my face getting hot talking about it. It's one of those things where emotions, so I've honored that shame for 10 years by allowing it to inhibit my authentic expression. And so that's in my body. And I no longer allow it to inhibit me, but like the energy in my body still has to digest, and it's going to slowly digest every time that I'm vulnerable and I talk about it and I share about it. And, you know, eventually I'll be able to talk about it where it doesn't make my face hot, but today's not the day.
Well, dude, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. Because yeah, and I'm like, I know I have those things because I've thought about that. Of just, yeah, like a comedian that has no intention and she has no idea that some kid is listening and then is going to have shame over that. And it's just, but it's like having compassion for that kid.
Yeah.
You know, of like, man, yeah, thanks for sharing that, dude. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And to recognize that that was an unconscious story that I had for about 10 years that kept me from sharing love with women who wanted my love because I had shame. Like, dude.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Dozens of relationships that I could feel could have been relationships in high school that I did not allow to become relationships because I had shame.
Because you didn't want to have sex? Is that
right.
why? Okay.
And dude, like, I didn't have sex for the first time until I was 19. And the moment it happened for the first time and I saw and I felt like how good it felt to just exchange that energy and not be in shame. And just how beautiful it was. Like, I recognized that I withheld that from dozens of women who
and
genuinely,
yourself.
and myself, who genuinely wanted it with me. Yeah.
Interesting. Dang, dude, I love that. And speaking of, you know, you as a child, one thing that I love about you is how much you want to be a dad. And I think this would be really cool for whether it's men listening or even women or anyone about, so can you tell people kind of like your dream, like, situation? Because I love how you have your own definition of this. It's not being a rich CEO. I just like tell people kind of like your life routine you see
for sure
in the near future.
I want to be good enough at business where I can create a system that allows me to record podcasts, make online courses, and write books in a way where once the system is set up, I don't have to worry about money, but I'm not trying to live an extravagant life, but it frees me up enough where I can do deep work every day, but that I can then show up fully as a father to my wife and my children, from the time my children are born until the youngest one is like 10. And then once I've done that part of my life, which is the part of my life that I know that I'm doing all this spiritual work to show up to as completely as I can. And I know I can't be perfect, and that's not what the goal is, but it's to give my family the gift of a sentimental man who's present for that really important part of their life. And then once the youngest is like 10, then I'll look at my business and then I'll be like, how big do I want to make this thing? You know, and then I'll do whatever that dance is.
What scares you about being a dad or a husband or anything?
I mean, the thing that's going to scare me is if they die.
Oh, for sure. That honestly, that I don't. Oh, yeah, that's terrifying.
But the fact is that I am willing to feel the grief of having a wife or child die if that means that I get to love them completely and presently and openly, and like I will pay that price. And of course I don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
I would love for them to all outlive me, but if that fear is keeping me from fully showing up to my love for them, I will not let that happen. I will.
Yeah.
I'm going to open my heart to that family and give it completely. And grief is the cost that I think you pay for truly loving something completely. And I think a lot of people get non-attachment wrong. I think people think that non-attachment means that you don't ever allow yourself to get attached. And I think what non-attachment is not restraining or resisting what is arising. And so when you have a child, you will be attached. And I think that the non-attachment is actually not resisting the fact that you will be attached.
Ooh, I love that. Will you repeat that?
I think non-attachment is not resisting the fact that you will be attached. And that when you lose that thing, non-attachment is not resisting the fact that you will be grieving, and to allow yourself to grieve. And that it's almost like grieving is how you process attachment, you know? And I think that the way you alchemize it is through tears. Like, I think that tears is the body's response to digesting attachment, But like, I would much rather live a life where I loved life so deeply that when I lost something, I grieved, than to live a life where I never felt grief. Like, I will accept that cost. Now, grief and suffering are different. It's the difference between like breaking a bone and then telling yourself a story for a year that the bone shouldn't have ever have been broken.
Ooh.
Like, I think that that's the difference there. Like, you're going to feel pain, but suffering is the stories that you tell after the pain experience is gone,
Mm-hmm. Dang, man, that's powerful. And I can like feel it. I'm like getting teary-eyed right now. I'm like, yes, like love to the fullest, man. And I know I cried this morning watching Kobe Bryant's the Lakers, the tribute.
Yeah.
Oh man, dude, that was like, oh my God. So what is, for people who are uncomfortable crying or view it as weakness, or even are still okay crying and resist it, like me, like right now, like I'm getting teary, but I'm like resisting it. Why should we just talk about the benefits of crying?
Yeah, man. I think crying is one of the ways that you celebrate living.
Ooh.
And it's not, I don't know a way to teach it through words. It's something that you have to experience somatically. But like, I love crying.
Mm-hmm.
I cry almost every day, at least once. And it's almost always because I feel myself being moved.
Oh,
and
that's awesome too.
And that it's beautiful. Like, I'm going to go watch Little Women, the movie, alone tonight. And
dude, I'm like crying now.
And I know,
love it, dude.
And I know I will cry. And I love it. Like,
the new one or the older one?
The new one that just came out that's
really
in
good.
theaters. Like, I know, and I cry almost every time I see a movie trailer. And like, I love it. I love crying, which is, I don't know if I've ever thought about it, but it's because almost like, there's a weird, if you're paying attention when you cry, I think you can feel, are you crying from the fact that you're repeating stories? Or are you crying from the felt experience of the thing before you? And I almost never cry from repeating stories, but I'm almost always moved to tears from the felt experience of something beautiful. And my crying is almost always like, it's like 2 to 5 tears. There's no like sniffle or like, it just comes. Now, if something's really moving or really sad, I'll do that ugly cry shit that we all do. But like, it's weird. It's kind of like throwing up. Like when I throw up, I know that it's actually healing me. Like I know that
makes you feel better.
The act of doing it is actually my body healing something. And it's the same with crying. Like when I feel tears come, it's like, oh, my body is healing. Like it's processing energy, you know?
Dang, man. What else is on your heart right now, man?
To be honest, nothing, because of the way that you were at lunch, I just knew that you would have questions, and like there's nothing on me right now.
Yeah, dude. I feel good. I just feel, I mean, you moved me to tears, man. So thank you. Just from your energy, dude. So thank you for your example. That's what I want to say is you are very wise. You're educated. You know, you have the experience to back it up. You for sure have the intellect. But the first time I met you in person, you gave me a hug that I've never felt before. And for real, dude, I've never felt a hug like that before. I was like, and I love how you combine the adjectives powerful and calm. And I love combining those adjectives too, because they usually don't go together.
Yeah.
But when someone has such a powerful calmness to them, it's such an amazing mixture. And that's what you have.
Thank you.
And
sometimes.
Yeah, but that's part of it. So yeah, you have the intellect, but you also have the feel. You lead by example. So that's what I just want to thank you for.
Thank you, brother. And thank you for saying it.
You know it, my man. Dang. Okay, well, we'll wrap this up. I think I had other questions, but I feel good. Anything else?
Thank you.
You're the man, dude. And then actually, no. We'll do on this new podcast. I don't want to do the typical promotions. People will be moved emotionally and they'll find you.
Heard.
All right. Love you, dude.
Love you. Thank you.